Welcome to the Staying in My Lane podcast. It's been a little bit since I was a guest on a podcast that I discussed my trauma that I went through in my first marriage. And that was not an easy thing to talk about by any means, but I felt really good about being able to tell my story for the first time, beginning to end, and really take my power back. I experienced a lot of abuse in a relationship that I was in that altered my sense of reality and what I thought about the world. And I'm a little bit more at peace now, and I feel ready to open up and talk about some more things that I experienced while being in that relationship. Again, this podcast is meant to be relatable. It's meant to talk about things that we don't talk about every day in our world. And it's meant to talk about those hard things and awkward conversations or topics. And today we're going to talk about narcissism. And I do want to say, not every person who has narcissistic tendencies or narcissistic personality disorder is abusive, but these are just things that I have discovered and researched on. And these are some of my personal experiences that I've had while being in a relationship with someone who is a narcissist. I actually had never heard of the word narcissist before I went to therapy with someone that I was in a relationship with. And narcissism is a mental health condition that involves that exaggerated sense of self-importance and a lack of empathy for other people. People who have that narcissistic personality disorder may also have that constant need for admiration and attention. I first heard this term in marriage therapy. After I heard that term, I really started to notice the characteristics that aligned with that narcissistic tendency. And people with narcissistic personality disorder may have that inflated sense of their own importance and believe that they're better than others or superior to others. And that was something that I noticed in relationships that I've had. I'm not going to point out any certain relationship, but it really just is that lack of empathy, that need for admiration, and even exploiting others for personal gain. They can be very envious and jealous people. And that is something that I noticed when I was in a relationship with someone, and it was really emotionally draining. Narcissists use manipulation tactics to keep that control of that person or make that person that they're with feel really bad. They like to gaslight people. And for anyone who hasn't heard of that term, gaslighting is a form of psychological abuse that really involves manipulating someone into questioning if that reality is even true. This can cause that self-doubt with memories or self-esteem, thoughts or experiences. So how does gaslighting work? The person who is gaslighting can deny facts or situations to try to make a victim question if the experience or situation really happened. This can mean denying the victim's feelings or acting like their experience in that situation never happened. And this really takes away that victim's power to voice how they feel or what they experienced in a situation. And this also means twisting their words to make them feel that they didn't experience that. And that's something that I really experienced in a relationship that I had. I thought I was going crazy. And those effects of gaslighting really are that the person who is being gaslighted may become dependent on the abuser because they feel that loss of control within themselves and frazzled almost, which is why I personally got stuck in that cycle, because even though that was tearing me apart to be in that relationship, I became really emotionally just out of it and confused a lot of the time, almost disoriented, and thinking that maybe things weren't really as bad as what they were made out to be. And that just kind of made me anxious and isolated. And I had a lot of difficulty trusting in my own feelings and experiences. For me, I felt like that really altered my perception of what was real and what was not. But in reality, it was all real. It just made me think that I was going crazy. So how do you recognize if you're being gaslighted? You can first look for those denial in facts or situations or feelings. And for me, I got to a point in my relationship where I was writing down in a journal and keeping a diary of what was happening, when it was happening, and the time that it was happening. So I could go back and look at that later and actually see what happened. And I even wrote down sometimes how I was feeling in that moment. so that I had that validation that I wasn't going crazy. I realized that the person that I was with at this time made me question my entire life, and it happened really gradually, and I didn't even realize that it was happening. I constantly doubted myself. I apologized all the time, and if you ask anyone in my life who's been really close to me, I used to excessively apologize for things because I had to live through a lot of questionable experiences that made me feel like things were my fault as a result of that. And I found myself apologizing for things even when I didn't do anything wrong, simply to avoid that conflict or make peace with the situation or a person. I talked about this before where I felt disoriented, which caused me to really isolate and distance myself from family and friends. And I always had to be with his friends, and that's who he always wanted me to go out with. Anytime that we would make friends outside of his friends, he would have to be there. Or if I would make a new friend through work or meeting someone in the city that we were in, he would become very possessive and not want me to be around that person by myself. So this really led to feelings of dependence on him and feeling like I couldn't do anything without him. I had a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety, which led to a lot of denial and invalidation or dismissiveness of my feelings. And that's a common gaslighting tactic that people like to use, is to dismiss or invalidate your feelings. For example, I used to express things that hurt my feelings. And this person would be, well, you're too sensitive, or you need to grow up, or that never happened. I have no idea what you're talking about. And that really goes back to that making me feel like I lost my sense of self or that I lost that sense of reality. At one point, I actually even went to a doctor because I thought that I had a diagnosis that hadn't even been diagnosed yet, or that I was going crazy and having a psychotic break. I was constantly second guessing myself, and now I actually know that that was a strong indication that he was gaslighting me and was narcissistic, and I just didn't know at the time. So recognizing these signs is really critical to breaking free from that cycle of gaslighting and reclaiming that sense of reality within yourself. Obviously, the gaslighting never stopped in the relationship that I was in because it became so abusive. And like I said, not every narcissist is going to be physically abusive, but that was just something that I experienced, which I feel really goes deeper into more intense issues that were just not even looked at until it was too late. For me, I really tried hard to not engage in arguments that distorted that sense of reality for me, or I just tried to not engage in those arguments at all. But this person that I was with at the time thrived on confusing me and really tried to draw me into arguments that he knew I would lose or that gave him that sense of power over me. Twisted my words a lot, and I would calmly try to disengage from the conversation, and he would follow me around the house or even take my debit card or car keys so that I couldn't leave a situation until he won the argument. And even when we went to therapy, as soon as we left the therapy session and as soon as we got in the car or at home, everything would fall apart and it would be right back to that gaslighting behavior and those manipulation tactics that he was using. And obviously, he was in and out of therapy and anger management throughout that whole situation. He went to rehab, but I really had to recognize for myself when it was time to leave. And I noticed that that gaslighting kept increasing, and it hit that point that it was past the point of emotional abuse. I can't even tell you how many times the police were called because he was either locking me out of my vehicle or driving away and taking my debit card so I couldn't leave. He really refused to acknowledge that behavior, and he didn't want to change. At the time, he was drinking and taking opioids and probably doing things that I still don't know about to this day. And so staying in an environment where I was constantly being made to doubt myself or feel scared or on edge 24/7, that walking on eggshells feeling, that caused me to have a lot of long-term emotional harm and damage that I've just really started working through in the past couple years. And I really had to deep dive in what I could do to get out of these feelings because I felt like I did something wrong, which obviously I know now is not true. But at the time, I really did feel that sense of feeling like a failure, feeling like it was my fault. And that was him gaslighting. Those were those effects of him gaslighting me and really emotionally abusing me. Looking back now, though, I realized that I did not do anything wrong and I was prioritizing my mental health and my safety and my children's mental health and safety by getting out of a situation that was really toxic. And Once the truth started to come out, it just really unraveled really quickly like a ball of yarn. And it started to make sense to me as to why things happened the way that they did and why that sense of control was always in the back of his mind. The best way I can explain it is all of those missing puzzle pieces that I couldn't put together are all making sense. They are all in their places now. And that kind of makes me sad because I never wanted this for myself or my children. I tried so hard to protect my children and protect myself from that abuse and pain, but it was really hard to accept that the person that was supposed to keep them safe and love them unconditionally was the biggest source of their pain and their harm. And that's where we're going to transition into, what does a narcissistic parent look like? Narcissistic parents are really self-centered and controlling, and they will prioritize their own needs over their children's needs any day and any time. Narcissistic parents are very manipulative, but they're very tactful at how they go about that. And they're very critical of their children, and they will usually pick one child to be more critical on than another in order to kind of have that power dynamic and watch that conflict rise and unfold between siblings. And they kind of feed off of that. They will do things like have unrealistic expectations or standards for a child, which I have watched other children go through. And I have seen personally, from my own point of view, that a child could not walk out of line or eat anything outside of what was provided for them or approved. Sometimes even signed off by a parent or a step-parent in a home. And obviously, I know that that probably sounds a little silly or excessive, but that is what narcissists feed off of, for that sense of control. That inflexibility really was a control tactic in the moment to set those unrealistic expectations to watch a child fail. So they knew the child could not be successful because that was an unrealistic expectation. So they were waiting for that child to screw up. And that's where that power and need for control comes in, to get that self-gratification or that pleasure in watching other people be sad or watching other people fail due to unrealistic expectations. Children of narcissistic parents may experience lifelong challenges. These include things like difficulties in setting boundaries, being able to keep those consistent boundaries, difficult in trusting others or themselves, low self-esteem, and low self-worth. And they may really question everything. They may start to question these things when they're older and feel that things may not have happened when in reality they did. We've talked about that need to look good in public and the need for a narcissist to present themselves in a way that other people would not know how they are behind closed doors. And this even goes for children of narcissistic parents. They may feel that their parents look really good on the outside, but behind closed doors, that sense of power and control is there, and they may feel nervous or have a lot of anxiety or even apologize for things a lot because they may not feel good enough for their parents. How do we end relationships with narcissists? That can be really difficult. And for me in my relationship that I was in, I honestly feel like I probably could have ended up on Dateline. And obviously that goes deeper than just narcissism and emotional abuse. But once I figured out what a narcissist hates most, I was able to kind of take control of my life again and feel safe without feeling manipulated. Narcissists hate being ignored and they hate being rejected. So thinking about ending a relationship with a narcissist, whether that's an intimate relationship or a parent-child relationship, people with that narcissistic personality may struggle a lot with internal distress and that shifting sense of self. They are not secure people. Even if they portray to be secure, they are not. Leaving a relationship with a narcissist really requires a firm and planned decision. You can't just walk out of a relationship with someone who is abusive, whether that's emotionally, mentally, physically, or any type of other abuse. You have to have a plan in place and prioritize your own well-being while trying to minimize that contact and create a strong support system, whether that's someone who just is one person as a support system, whether it's a group of people, or whether it's family. And really try to minimize that contact with the narcissist, because narcissists use manipulation tactics to try to draw you back in. They may even call your family. And I remember I had an experience where I left to go back to my parents' house, and this person called my mom crying, begging me to come back, and almost tricked my family into thinking that he was a good person and that I was just the crazy one. And maybe this is a stretch, but who knows? Maybe that's why there's been an assumption made about who I am, because maybe people do think that some of that was true, and it's just not. This person made me look really unstable and not so healthy. And I was very confused about a lot of my memories, and really detailed memories are starting to come back. And I'm starting to see that I was not unstable. I was not healthy. I was, in fact, stable. I was just manipulated by someone who wanted that sense of control. It's really important to have really strong boundaries, and really critical to reflect on those boundaries and set that plan in place to limit that communication after a breakup with someone who's a narcissist. If you have to change your phone number, or if you have to change your address, or go to a safe place that they don't know where you're at, narcissists don't like to lose control. So when you leave a situation or a relationship with a narcissist, they lose that sense of control. They lose that sense of power over you. And then they have to explain to everyone why you left, or why you guys are not together anymore. And that can be really embarrassing for the narcissist to have to explain, because they're probably going to come up with a lie or a fallacy on why you left, and even blame it back onto you, again, making you look like the crazy one. But leaving is vital for healing those emotional effects of the relationship, and often those people who are leaving are in a fight or flight position all the time. And for me, I personally lived in that chronic state of fight or flight for so many years that I am just starting to get out of that chronic fight or flight feeling. And it took me a lot before I left to be certain in my decision. And I really had to take that action and stick to my plan, in which I was fully committed to leaving. But it was really hard because, again, narcissists can draw you back in and use that manipulation tactic to make you doubt yourself and create even doubt in the people who are around you. So again, be sure in a decision when you are leaving a narcissist and have that plan in place. If you even have to create a safety plan, because actually I did that with my therapist, and I feared that manipulation and that hostility, and I had a plan on how to communicate with my ex in which I protected my own safety mentally, emotionally, and physically, and that ensured that I didn't give him any control. I didn't get into arguments with him. I didn't communicate with him unless it was through a third party, because that really gave me that sense of having control over what I was saying and being able to document that in text form. So that way, nothing could come back to where I was losing my sense of control again. That goes back into what to expect when you leave a narcissist. Narcissistic people will make you feel responsible for their pain and use those guilt and manipulation tactics to make you question if this was the right decision, or make you deny everything, and even having denial in your own decisions to leave. You know, narcissists are really good at love bombing, guilt tripping, manipulating, and criticizing you into a way where you feel that you have to rely on them to feel fulfilled. And that's just simply not true. You should not have to walk on eggshells constantly, or constantly feel criticized or nervous or degraded. And for me, I had to learn how to not do that. I had to learn how to not walk on eggshells, or not constantly criticize myself or take criticism from other people in a negative way. And that was really hard for me. One thing that I didn't notice until after I was out of the relationship was that he only wanted to associate with high power or high status people, even though he was not a high power or high status person. He wanted to associate his life with high power things and places. Materialistic things had a lot of importance to this person that I was with, and he always had a new vehicle, or he was always looking for new furniture, or always wanting to look for a new house. And they believe that they're better than people. They believe that they are above other people, and they expect that recognition when they buy something such as a new vehicle or a new house. They want to have that Facebook post showing their new vehicle so they get those likes. They want to buy a new house and have that housewarming party. to get that attention from their friends. I realized that narcissists treat children as possessions, even their own children. So that was really interesting because I was able to observe that firsthand through an experience that I had. And that's the complete opposite of how I feel and what I believe. Narcissists value things, not people. They care more about the possession than they do the person. And so being able to control their children or have their children look good for them to look good is really important to them. And that sense of entitlement and that better than other people attitude, taking advantage of other people for their own benefit, are all things that a narcissist will do to really make themselves look better than the person standing next to them. What about when there's two narcissistic people in a relationship together? This can actually be better than a narcissist dating a non-narcissist, because narcissists will actually emotionally drain another person because they require that constant need for admiration and attention without giving anything in return. This is because narcissists often do not know how to create that intimate and loving, lasting relationship, whether that is an intimate relationship or whether that is a familial relationship. People in romantic relationships who are narcissists may bounce from relationship to relationship. And so that's really interesting to just think about for a second, because when two narcissists are in a relationship and form that bond, they can instead feed off of each other in order to reach their goals and feel that fulfillment and even exaggerate their egos. They have a same common goal with the same outcome, and so they won't find that narcissistic behavior odd or selfish because that is what they see as normal. And obviously, I can't say that narcissists don't fall in love. I'm just going based off of what I've seen and what I've read and what I've observed personally. But they may feel that infatuation with each other, the need to have their confidence boosted, and that need to feel praised constantly, in which I was able to observe firsthand with a narcissist in my life. And I was also able to observe two narcissistic people in a relationship and step back and observe that from an outside point of view, which was really weird because looking into our relationship, it was such a power dynamic for that. And they both tried to manipulate each other, but both did not accept that they are being manipulated because they often think that they can outsmart each other and have that power over each other, in which it just becomes a competition at that point. I was even able to observe a conflict between two narcissists who were married, and they really drug me into their conflict and tried to kind of talk behind each other's backs. And what was supposed to be a private or intimate conversation, they made it into a competition where they were shit-talking each other and poking fun at each other, and even at one point emotionally degrading each other in front of me, and that felt really uncomfortable. So I had to create a lot of boundaries around that and even had to block their phone numbers at one point because I just didn't want to be part of that conversation, to be honest. Narcissistic people will take advantage of that vulnerability, but one thing that they do is when they are in relationships with emotionally stable people or people that have that power and that sense of control over themselves, if they no longer feel that they're getting what they need from the relationship, they will often discard the people like they're trash. This is just a really intriguing topic for me because it's something that I had no idea what it was when I first met my ex, and it's something that I've looked into a lot and gotten to understand more. And all of my trauma, all of those red flags that I kind of ignored that were going off in my head all make sense now. And I really hope this conversation was informative for you if you didn't know what narcissism was and if you didn't understand it. Maybe now you have a better understanding of how to recognize the signs of somebody who may be in a relationship with a narcissist, or help recognize those red flags are that I missed. And so hopefully I can help somebody by having this conversation. As a reminder, please remember that this conversation is for educational purposes only. This does not reflect my social work values, my social work views, or my social work profession. This does not treat or diagnose narcissistic personality disorder. This does not give any medical or social work advice. Thank you and have a great day, you guys.